The air was thick with whispers, and the tabloids had already exploded with the usual frenzy, but no one saw this coming. Piers Morgan, the outspoken media figure known for his relentless commentary, dropped a bombshell that left even the most seasoned royal watchers speechless. He claimed that Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, who had stepped back from royal duties years ago, had attempted a secret, calculated return to the very institution she had publicly distanced herself from. And according to him, every single effort had been politely, or perhaps not so politely, declined. The audacity of it, the sheer ambition, the hope wrapped in quiet desperation. It was a story that seemed ripped straight from a drama series, yet it was unfolding in real life, in the corridors of power, and in the quiet rooms of palace aides and institutional officials. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine for a moment someone stepping back from the most scrutinized family in the world, someone who has become a global symbol of modern royalty and media fascination, and then quietly trying to reinsert herself into the very circle she left. What drives a person to attempt such a comeback? Is it nostalgia, a sense of unfinished business, or perhaps the realization that influence is not merely symbolic, it is tangible, and it can be wielded? The idea that Meghan reached out privately, bypassing public statements, bypassing headlines, and going directly to senior royals and key institutions opens a world of intrigue that has captivated millions. It is, in essence, a game of high-stakes negotiation, but one played behind closed doors, where each declined invitation, each unanswered call, and each polite refusal carried the weight of silent judgment. Piers Morgan, whose relationship with Meghan has long been contentious, positioned himself as the bearer of this revelation. Whether you admire him or loathe him, the assertion is clear. Meghan Markle attempted to restart her royal influence, and according to him, it was met with unanimous rejection. The tension in that sentence is palpable. The Duchess, whose every move has been analyzed, critiqued, and celebrated, was portrayed as making a series of moves no one anticipated. The very public figure who once redefined royal narratives now faced private rebuffs in spaces where discretion was key. What were these efforts? Who received her calls and letters? Why was she denied? And what does it say about her standing, not in the media, but in the private corridors of royal influence? Before we delve deeper, consider the stakes. Meghan Markle's life has been a whirlwind of contrasts. The global adoration following her engagement, the intense scrutiny after stepping back from royal duties, and the polarizing public opinion that followed. Her decision to leave was historic, controversial, and polarizing, and yet, the allure of influence, of belonging to an institution with centuries of legacy, apparently lingered. The notion that someone so accustomed to public visibility would risk rejection in private spaces demonstrates an audacity few can comprehend. It is not simply a personal endeavor. It is a psychological gambit, a move that reveals ambition, vulnerability, and perhaps a desire to reclaim a narrative long dictated by others. Now, let's address the nature of these private overtures. Piers Morgan's report suggests that Meghan reached out to a select group of individuals and institutions tied to the monarchy. This is not about casual emails or social media posts. We are talking discreet attempts, communications meant to bypass the public eye, possibly aiming to secure re-entry into royal circles, influence future engagements, or regain ceremonial privileges. Each declined invitation, each ignored correspondence, speaks volumes. There is a tension here between public persona and private reality, between what the world perceives and what actually transpires behind palace doors. This is where the drama intensifies, where human emotion, ego, and the intricate dance of tradition collide. You might be wondering, why did she attempt this? Why now? Was it a calculated strategy or a personal impulse? The timing is crucial, especially in the backdrop of continuing media coverage of her and Harry's activities post-royalty. The public eye never blinks, and every action, however subtle, can be amplified into controversy. But private attempts, as Piers claims, suggest a more nuanced narrative, one of careful planning, discretion, and anticipation of a response, or at least the hope for one. The very act of trying implies a belief that doors could open, that influence could be regained, and that the past could, in some form, be reconciled with the present. Let's explore the human element for a moment. Imagine receiving a call or letter from someone as high-profile as Meghan Markle. There is an inherent power dynamic at play, a mix of curiosity, caution, and perhaps even apprehension. Institutional leaders and royal aides are not strangers to celebrity overtures, but this is different. This is someone intimately familiar with the inner workings of royalty, someone who understands the protocols, the traditions, and the expectations. To decline such a request is not merely a professional decision. It carries social and symbolic weight. It is a subtle assertion of boundaries, a reinforcement of hierarchy, and in the context of Piers Morgan's report, a confirmation that the monarchy and its associated institutions were not swayed by past fame or public sympathy. The story becomes even more riveting when we consider the contrast between public narratives and private reality. Meghan Markle, in public, projects confidence, independence, and influence. She commands attention with her projects, her statements, and her appearances. Yet, according to Piers, behind the closed doors of royal corridors and institutional offices, she faced rejection. The irony is stark. A figure whose every public move generates headlines and social media storms could encounter quiet refusals where nobody else knows. It is a testament to the complexity of power dynamics, where fame does not always equate to acceptance, and where the weight of history and protocol often outweighs celebrity status. Consider also the emotional landscape of these private interactions. For Meghan, each declined overture may have been a moment of frustration, reflection, and recalibration. For the recipients, there is a balancing act, acknowledging a former member of royalty while maintaining established boundaries and traditions. The human drama is layered, with multiple perspectives, motivations, and stakes. It is no wonder that Piers Morgan's revelation has captured attention. It peels back the layers of public perception and exposes the tension, ambition, and vulnerability that lie beneath. But what does this mean for the broader narrative of Meghan Markle's life post-royalty? It suggests that stepping back does not necessarily sever the ties of influence, nor does it erase the desire for recognition, belonging, or authority. It reveals an ongoing negotiation between personal ambition and institutional rigidity, between public image and private reality. And it underscores the enduring fascination with royalty itself, a fascination that transcends borders, generations, and personal choices. As we move into the chapters that follow, we will explore the intricate details of these alleged attempts, the reactions from the royal family and institutions, and the broader implications for Meghan's standing in the monarchy and the public eye. We will examine Piers Morgan's claims with an analytical lens, exploring the credibility, the context, and the potential fallout. Along the way, we will delve into emotional beats, surprising contradictions, and ironic twists that make this story far more than a simple media headline. It is a window into human ambition, rejection, and the complex world of modern royalty. And just when you think you understand the stakes, consider this. According to Piers, not a single overture was accepted. Every attempt, carefully measured and discreet, ended in rejection. It is a stunning revelation, one that invites questions, speculation, and perhaps even disbelief. How did it come to this? What exactly was requested, and why were all doors closed? These questions set the stage for a story that unfolds like a drama series, each chapter building tension, revealing character, and leaving us hungry for the next twist. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The announcement reverberated around the world like a thunderclap. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are stepping back from senior royal duties. Simple words, yet they carried shockwaves that no one could have fully anticipated. In that moment, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry redefined what it meant to walk away from a monarchy steeped in centuries of tradition. The world paused, the media exploded, and social media became a battlefield of speculation, opinion, and outrage. Some celebrated their boldness. Others decried it as betrayal. But for those inside the palace, and for Meghan herself, it was only the beginning of a much more complex, emotional journey, one that, as Piers Morgan would later reveal, had far-reaching consequences even years later. Consider the gravity of such a decision. Royals are conditioned for life in the public eye, trained in protocol, and bound by invisible chains of expectation. Stepping back wasn't just a career move. It was a seismic personal and familial shift. For Meghan, it meant leaving behind the institution she married into, leaving the roles, the influence, and the ceremonies that defined her public identity. For Harry, it was a choice fraught with personal and historical tension, a stand against the pressures of media scrutiny, familial expectations, and the heavy burden of legacy. Together, they were rewriting the rules. But rewriting rules has consequences, and consequences often manifest in ways no one sees coming. At the heart of this story is Meghan. Her exit was particularly scrutinized. The public narrative was full of contradictions. A beloved American actress joins the royal family, wins hearts, becomes the subject of admiration and envy, and then abruptly seeks to carve her own path. Some called it empowerment. Others labeled it arrogance. Yet few paused to consider the emotional and strategic calculation behind her decision. Leaving the royal fold didn't just free her from protocol. It also exposed her to a new, uncharted battlefield where influence, perception, and power had to be renegotiated. And according to Piers Morgan, it was in this very space that Meghan later attempted her secret comeback. But before we jump ahead, let's unpack the exit itself. The official announcement framed it as a mutual decision. A desire to step back, to gain financial independence, and to balance personal and public life. Yet anyone familiar with palace dynamics knows that mutual often masks layers of negotiation, tension, and compromise. It is unlikely that any move of this magnitude happens without debate, resistance, and behind-the-scenes strategizing. Sources hinted at months of deliberation, quiet meetings, and subtle maneuvers designed to protect both public perception and personal relationships. For Meghan, navigating this labyrinth would have required immense foresight, courage, and, arguably, audacity. Public reaction was immediate. Headlines ranged from praise to outrage. On social media, hashtags erupted, opinion pieces multiplied, and pundits debated endlessly. Royal family fractured. Duchess abandons duty. A new era begins. The diversity of responses reflected the duality of Meghan's persona, admired by some, criticized by others, but never ignored. Every statement she made was dissected, every move magnified. And yet, behind the public commentary, the private ramifications were even more significant. Leaving wasn't just a headline. It was a shift in relational power, in access, and in the subtle hierarchies that define royal life. For Meghan, the exit wasn't devoid of strategy. Interviews, media projects, and careful public statements suggested a calculated plan to establish an identity independent of the crown while maintaining visibility, influence, and relevance. She and Harry navigated a delicate balance, asserting autonomy while retaining the residual prestige of being royals. Yet this delicate balancing act introduced contradictions. How do you remain influential while stepping back? How do you claim freedom while benefiting from association? The public sees a figure of glamour, advocacy, and celebrity, but behind the curtain, there were tensions, calculations, and ambitions quietly shaping every move. And here is where Piers Morgan's claims become particularly intriguing. He suggests that even after the exit, Meghan never fully let go. She still sought influence, still aimed to retain engagement in certain circles, and, privately, allegedly attempted to rekindle connections with the royal establishment. Think about that for a moment. She had stepped back publicly, gaining freedom and distance. Yet, she allegedly sought entry points, communications, and perhaps even validation from the very world she had left. What does that tell us about human ambition, desire, and the need for recognition? It complicates the narrative of autonomy. It adds layers of irony, independence in public, outreach in private, rejection met with perseverance. To understand the weight of her decision, we need to consider the personal stakes. Leaving the palace is more than stepping away from a role. It is stepping away from family traditions, long-established hierarchies, and a life path defined by centuries of precedent. For Meghan, the consequences were emotional and psychological. There is the thrill of freedom, but also the sting of separation, the tension of estrangement, and the pressure of navigating uncharted social terrain. Her public persona, carefully cultivated, intersected with private ambition and the very real human desire for connection and influence. The contradictions are striking. Can you truly leave a world and still try to participate in it? And if so, how discreetly can one manage that? Public perception is another layer entirely. Meghan became, for many, a symbol of modern royal rebellion, a woman challenging tradition, confronting media narratives, and asserting personal agency. Yet symbols are fragile. Public favor shifts, social narratives evolve, and a single misstep can reframe the story. Morgan's bombshell reveals that behind the symbolic image, Meghan may have navigated a more complex reality, one where influence, relationships, and access mattered enough to attempt re-entry, despite the risks of rejection. It is a narrative tension that fuels fascination, the contrast between public perception and private endeavor. And then there is the reaction of the royal family. While the exit was publicly presented with decorum, private responses are far less scripted. According to insiders, there was a mix of understanding, disappointment, and cautious distance. Any reintegration, even subtle or symbolic, would require negotiation, trust, and alignment with established protocols. The palace is a system of layers, each with its own logic, hierarchy, and expectation. For Meghan, navigating this after leaving would have been akin to walking a tightrope with no safety net, relying on relationships that had been transformed by her public departure. Finally, consider the timing. Meghan's exit came at a moment of intense public scrutiny. The media was relentless, the public opinion divided, and the pressures of personal life and parenthood intertwined with professional ambitions. Yet, according to Piers, this backdrop did not deter her from quietly seeking influence. On the contrary, it may have intensified her desire to maintain relevance and connection, revealing a tension between independence and attachment, ambition and estrangement. These dynamics, subtle yet profound, set the stage for a drama that would unfold behind closed doors, largely invisible to the world but explosive in impact. The question for the audience becomes unavoidable. Why would someone who has publicly left the royal fold attempt to reconnect in private? Is it longing, strategy, or an underestimation of the boundaries that institutions maintain? And perhaps more intriguingly, what happens when such attempts are consistently rejected? For Meghan, Piers Morgan claims, the answer was a series of rebuffs, each one quietly shaping the narrative of her post-royal life. The interplay of ambition, rejection, and resilience is the human drama at the heart of this story, a drama that resonates far beyond the palace walls. But just as the world thought they had understood her departure, Piers reveals something extraordinary. Behind the headlines, the public interviews, and the social media statements, Meghan had allegedly made a move no one saw coming. A move that attempted to bridge the gap between independence and influence, visibility and authority, rejection and acceptance. The audacity of this secret comeback is what set the stage for the bombshell Morgan would drop, leaving even the most loyal royal watchers stunned. And as it turns out, that first move was only the beginning of a chain reaction that would reveal ambition, tension, and conflict in a way that nobody outside those private corridors could have predicted. What if I told you that the story of Meghan Markle's attempted royal comeback didn't just exist in whispers or tabloid speculation? That someone with direct access and a history of relentless reporting claims to have the full picture. That someone is Piers Morgan. Love him or hate him, his revelations in this case are impossible to ignore. He asserts that Meghan, after stepping back from royal duties, quietly tried to reassert influence, reach certain royals, and even reconnect with institutions she had once engaged with publicly. And according to him, every attempt was met with polite, sometimes pointed, refusals. From the very beginning, Morgan's claims have sparked controversy. Critics accuse him of sensationalism, of exaggerating for clicks, of skewing facts to fit a narrative that paints Meghan as desperate or overly ambitious. Supporters argue he is a fearless journalist exposing truths others won't touch. But the intrigue lies not just in whether every detail is accurate. It's in what these claims reveal about ambition, status, and the intricate world of royalty. How does someone navigate influence once they've left the inner circles? And what does it say about a person willing to quietly knock on doors that have closed, fully aware that rejection could, and would, follow. Morgan's insider scoop begins with the people Meghan allegedly reached out to. According to him, this was not a generalized, broad appeal. It wasn't a vague social media post or a subtle hint in public speeches. She supposedly sent targeted communications to individuals and institutions with the capacity to grant influence, recognition, or ceremonial roles. Think high-ranking aides, charitable boards, and key royal intermediaries. These were carefully considered gestures, strategic, deliberate, and, if true, designed to test the waters for reintegration without making a public spectacle. Now, pause and imagine the tension of such a situation. On one side, Meghan, the former Duchess, a global celebrity, a woman who commands headlines with a single statement. On the other side, the gatekeepers of centuries-old institutions, steeped in protocol, tradition, and hierarchy. Each declined message, each unanswered call, each politely phrased refusal carried weight far beyond the immediate interaction. It was a subtle assertion of authority, a reminder that influence is not automatically reclaimed simply by past status or public recognition. Morgan describes, in dramatic fashion, several instances of these alleged private attempts. There were emails that went unanswered, letters that received careful, neutral responses, calls that were returned with formal, non-committal replies. And behind these rejections was an intricate dance of discretion and loyalty. For those inside the palace and affiliated institutions, the challenge was clear. They had to balance respect for Meghan as a former royal and global public figure against the necessity of upholding boundaries, precedent, and protocol. Every action was a negotiation, some silent, some unavoidable, all consequential. What makes Morgan's claims particularly captivating is the alleged consistency of these rejections. According to him, there wasn't one instance where Meghan's overture was embraced. The pattern was uniform, persistent, and undeniable. It paints a picture of a carefully orchestrated attempt to re-establish ties, met with a clear and deliberate refusal. That contrast between ambition and denial is where the emotional drama unfolds. One cannot help but feel tension, irony, and a subtle undercurrent of tragedy. A public figure accustomed to influence suddenly encountering the firm boundaries of established institutions, quietly, privately, unreported, is a story that blends human ambition with the reality of structured authority. Morgan's perspective also emphasizes timing and strategy. He suggests that Meghan's attempts were not impulsive. They were measured, calculated, and possibly even motivated by awareness of the broader media landscape. The exit from royalty had not erased public interest. It had intensified it. Every movement, however discreet, was part of a larger narrative she could shape, or hope to shape. Yet the very discretion that was meant to protect her attempts from scrutiny may have heightened the stakes. When influence is pursued quietly and rejected quietly, the consequences are deeply personal, emotionally charged, and, as Morgan reports, unrelentingly clear. But Morgan does more than just report the actions. He contextualizes them within the ongoing tension between public image and private reality. Meghan's public persona, confident, independent, media-savvy, stands in stark contrast to the private persistence described by Morgan. That tension alone is riveting. How does someone reconcile ambition with repeated rejection? How does a person maintain poise and public grace when privately navigating refusals that could affect reputation, relationships, and long-term strategy? Morgan's account hints at layers of complexity, determination, audacity, vulnerability, and perhaps a measure of miscalculation. He also introduces the human dimension of these interactions. Those receiving Meghan's overtures were not mere placeholders. They were people navigating loyalty, protocol, and ethical considerations. According to Morgan, the responses were carefully constructed to maintain dignity, avoid confrontation, and uphold tradition. Yet behind the formalities lay emotions, curiosity, wariness, admiration, and sometimes frustration. It is a delicate balance. Acknowledge a former duchess while enforcing boundaries, a task that, Morgan implies, was executed with precision by palace insiders. Perhaps the most compelling part of Morgan's revelations is the implication of intent. Meghan's attempts were not casual, they carried a clear goal. She sought influence, recognition, and a measure of ceremonial or institutional involvement that would allow her to retain a foothold in the world she had publicly left. The audacity of this ambition is part of what fuels fascination. There is a psychological element at play, ambition tempered by discretion, desire balanced by awareness, and the calculation that even after rejection, the effort itself could shape perception, narrative, and potential opportunities. Morgan's reporting also hints at consequences beyond the immediate refusals. Each declined attempt, he claims, subtly reshaped Meghan's standing, her approach to future outreach, and possibly even her perception of the monarchy and associated institutions. This is where audience curiosity spikes. How does repeated rejection from powerful institutions affect someone accustomed to influence and attention? How does it reshape relationships, expectations, and personal strategy? Morgan's account invites viewers to consider not just the actions, but the emotional and strategic fallout, an unseen story unfolding behind the headlines. Yet, even as Morgan details these attempts, he leaves room for ambiguity. There is no public confirmation, no documents released, no direct statements from Meghan herself. The intrigue lies in the tension between claim and confirmation, between reported narrative and undisputed fact. This ambiguity fuels speculation, encourages engagement, and keeps audiences riveted. The human mind naturally seeks closure, resolution, or insight, and Morgan's scoop provides tantalizing glimpses while withholding definitive answers. Finally, Morgan positions himself as both observer and interpreter. He frames these events within the larger narrative of Meghan's life post-royalty. The tale is not merely one of ambition met with refusal. It is a story of personal resilience, strategic missteps, and the complex interplay between public persona and private endeavor. According to Morgan, the drama is continuous, evolving, and full of unexpected twists, a story that challenges assumptions about influence, autonomy, and human behavior in the rarefied, meticulously structured world of royalty. So what does this all mean? For Meghan, it suggests an unrelenting drive to remain connected to the institution she left, an ambition that operates quietly behind closed doors. For the royal family and institutions, it signals the need to balance discretion, protocol, and personal dynamics in responding to overtures from high-profile former members. And for the public, it offers a window into a world where influence is fragile, relationships are complex, and private maneuvers can be just as dramatic, if not more so, than public headlines. But Morgan's insider scoop hints at a deeper, more dramatic layer. One particular communication, he claims, didn't just fail. It created ripple effects that unsettled palace aides, challenged assumptions, and set the stage for a series of events that would later make headlines in unexpected ways. It is a revelation that bridges ambition, rejection, and strategic miscalculation. And according to Morgan, this is only the tip of the iceberg. What was in that communication? Who received it? And why did it have such a profound impact on the private corridors of power? The answers, according to Morgan, are more shocking than anyone imagined, and they reveal a narrative that mixes courage, audacity, and irony in a way only the inner workings of royalty can. What if the most consequential conversations in recent royal history didn't happen in public, on camera, or in a palace hall? What if the moves that could redefine influence and relationships occurred in silence, through letters tucked into envelopes, emails drafted with precision, or calls made with careful deliberation? According to Piers Morgan, that was precisely the arena in which Meghan Markle operated. Behind the headlines, behind the public persona that commanded attention, she allegedly embarked on a series of private overtures, secret letters, discreet calls, and carefully phrased emails, aimed at re-establishing a foothold within the royal sphere she had left. Imagine the scenario. A former duchess, navigating the delicate line between independence and influence, reaches out privately to key players, senior royals, trusted aides, and affiliated institutions. Each communication is laden with meaning, strategy, and subtle persuasion. It is a game of discretion where words carry weight far beyond their surface meaning. Morgan's reporting suggests that these were not casual attempts. They were deliberate, calculated, and designed to elicit responses that might reopen doors that had, at least publicly, been closed. Consider the nature of these secret letters. According to Morgan, they were polite but purposeful, carefully worded to maintain diplomacy while signaling intent. The language, he claims, balanced respect and assertiveness. The goal, to remind recipients of her contributions, her past influence, and perhaps even the potential benefits of a renewed association. It is a high-stakes negotiation conducted in silence, where every sentence could determine the outcome. The emotional tension is immense. Every refusal, every non-response, carries not just professional implications, but personal weight. Then there were the calls. Private, intentional, and calculated. Unlike letters, which could be set aside or forwarded, calls require immediate attention and response. Morgan implies that these conversations were delicate, often teetering on the edge of protocol violation, yet executed with an understanding of the social and hierarchical dynamics at play. Recipients of these calls faced a challenge: to balance courtesy and respect with the necessity of upholding boundaries, tradition, and precedents. Each call was a test of strategy, a probe into willingness, and an insight into how Meghan's presence could be managed within the broader royal and institutional ecosystem. What makes these attempts so fascinating is the psychological component. Meghan, accustomed to public adoration, found herself navigating the private world of refusals and careful responses. Imagine the internal calculus required: anticipating reactions, weighing consequences, and crafting messages that would be effective yet respectful. According to Morgan, this balancing act demonstrates both audacity and an acute awareness of the delicate social fabric she was attempting to influence. It is a narrative tension that grips audiences. The intersection of power, ambition, and rejection behind closed doors. Morgan also highlights the responses, or lack thereof, that Meghan received. Letters returned unopened, emails met with formal acknowledgement but no commitment, calls answered politely yet noncommittally. The consistency of these outcomes, he asserts, paints a picture of controlled rejection, the palace and affiliated institutions maintaining authority while avoiding public spectacle. There is an emotional drama here that is almost cinematic: ambition met with protocol, desire tempered by history, and aspiration confronted by steadfast boundaries. The stakes of these private overtures are not trivial. Each declined attempt, each unanswered message, reinforces hierarchy, tradition, and precedent. Morgan suggests that this repeated pattern of refusal was a silent but clear message. Influence cannot be reclaimed solely through past status or public visibility. For Meghan, this would have been both frustrating and illuminating, a stark reminder of the enduring structures of power she sought to navigate. But there is another layer, one that Morgan teases with careful ambiguity. He hints at specific communications that caused ripple effects, letters or calls that did more than simply fail. They allegedly unsettled aides, prompted internal discussions, and even reshaped how Meghan was perceived within certain circles. This adds suspense and drama. It's no longer just about failed attempts. It's about the consequences of strategic outreach, the reactions of powerful actors, and the delicate balance between ambition and protocol. Audience curiosity spikes here. What exactly was said in these letters? Who picked up the phone, and how did they respond? How did Meghan manage her expectations and emotional state amid repeated denials? Morgan's account invites us to imagine the tension, the anticipation, and the subtle maneuvering inherent in such communications. The contrast between the glamorous public image and the private struggle is both compelling and ironic. A figure celebrated worldwide encounters rejection in the most discreet of spaces. And yet, despite the repeated refusals, there is an undercurrent of resilience. According to Morgan, Meghan did not retreat immediately. She recalibrated, reevaluated, and tried again. Each communication was a calculated risk, an attempt to test boundaries without overstepping them. It demonstrates a persistence and ambition that, for better or worse, is emblematic of her personality and public persona. The drama of repeated, quiet efforts juxtaposed against high-profile independence makes the narrative irresistible. Morgan also emphasizes the human and emotional dimensions of these interactions. Receiving a call from a former duchess, for instance, is not a neutral experience. There is curiosity, caution, and perhaps even anxiety among recipients. How should one respond? How does one maintain protocol without causing offense? Each interaction, according to Morgan, was a careful dance, one that highlighted the tension between personal connection, institutional responsibility, and historical precedent. Interestingly, these letters and calls were not just about influence. They were also about visibility. By reaching out privately, Meghan was signaling engagement without public fanfare. It is a subtle strategy: maintain relevance, assert agency, and navigate the complex interplay between independence and association. The irony is palpable, stepping back publicly while trying to step forward privately. Morgan's account positions these efforts as both ambitious and calculated, a duality that fuels both admiration and skepticism. What is particularly fascinating is the broader context. Morgan suggests that these overtures occurred amidst continuing media scrutiny, public attention, and ongoing projects that kept Meghan in the spotlight. The private communications were strategic extensions of her public persona, designed to test the waters without jeopardizing the image she had cultivated. This interplay between public and private, visibility and discretion, forms a central tension in the narrative and explains why the story captivates audiences. Yet the pattern of rejection persisted. Letters returned, emails ignored, calls politely declined. According to Morgan, this was not a one-off phenomenon but a consistent trend. It underscores a reality that even global fame, public adoration, and celebrity cannot always override institutional protocol, history, or hierarchy. Meghan's attempts, however strategically executed, collided with centuries of tradition, careful management, and the necessity of maintaining boundaries within a highly structured environment. And then comes the twist that sets the stage for the next chapter. Morgan hints that among the letters and calls, one specific outreach caused unexpected ripples. It was not simply ignored or declined. It triggered internal discussions, elicited strong reactions, and had consequences that reverberated beyond the immediate recipients. This is the moment where private communication intersects with broader influence, where a single action, discreetly executed, generates disproportionate impact. The intrigue is irresistible. What was in that communication? Who was involved? Why did it provoke such a reaction? According to Morgan, the answers reveal a deeper layer of strategy, audacity, and miscalculation, a revelation that no public headline could fully capture. It is the quiet drama behind the curtain, the high-stakes negotiation in the shadows, the intersection of ambition, protocol, and human emotion. As the narrative unfolds, we are left to imagine the tension in those private spaces. The anticipation, the careful phrasing, the hope that doors might open, and the repeated realization that influence, even for someone as prominent as Meghan Markle, has limits when tradition and hierarchy are at play. It is a story that blends human psychology, ambition, and the rarefied world of royalty into a captivating tale that engages, surprises, and provokes reflection. But what made that one particular outreach so remarkable, and what came next would change the course of this secret comeback in ways even Morgan could barely anticipate. Imagine being on the receiving end of a call from someone the world knows as a duchess, someone whose every move has made headlines across continents. You are part of a centuries-old institution where tradition, hierarchy, and protocol define every interaction. And then, quietly, privately, this former member reaches out, seeking influence, engagement, or perhaps just recognition. According to Piers Morgan, this is exactly what Meghan Markle did, and the reaction, across the board, was the same. No, every attempt met polite refusal, cautious deflection, or careful avoidance. But the story behind these no's is far more complex and far more revealing than it seems. The royal family, steeped in history, operates on precedent. Decisions are rarely impulsive. Even minor gestures are calculated. For Meghan, navigating this landscape after stepping back from official duties was akin to trying to enter a fortress through doors that had been quietly closed. Morgan claims that senior royals, from immediate family members to advisors, received her communications with caution, awareness, and, in some cases, subtle frustration. These refusals were not personal vendettas. They were structural and procedural, a reflection of the monarchy's rules and its long-standing approach to governance, influence, and loyalty. Consider the emotional dynamics at play. Meghan had once been at the center of this institution, her public presence commanding attention, her actions scrutinized and celebrated. To be declined in private, by individuals she once interacted with regularly, creates a tension between past identity and present reality. The contrast is striking: public adoration versus private rebuff. Morgan emphasizes that these interactions were conducted discreetly, with careful wording and consideration on both sides, but the underlying message was unmistakable. Influence is not simply reclaimed through past status. It must be earned, navigated, and, sometimes, negotiated with patience and alignment to institutional expectations. Morgan recounts instances where Meghan allegedly reached out to key family members through aides or intermediaries. The responses, he claims, were measured, polite, and deliberate. There were no confrontations, no public scandals. Yet the refusals themselves carried weight. They sent a clear signal. Private ambition does not always translate into accepted authority. The emotional toll, according to Morgan's portrayal, was significant. For someone accustomed to shaping narratives, experiencing rejection quietly is an unusual and potentially humbling experience. Audience curiosity naturally spikes here. Which royals declined her? Was it a particular senior family member, a trusted aide, or a combination of both? Morgan's account suggests a pattern rather than isolated incidents. The refusals were consistent across multiple points of contact, reinforcing the sense that boundaries had been firmly reestablished. This is where the drama intensifies. It's no longer a matter of perception. It is about real-world interactions, decisions, and subtle but powerful rejections. Each no is a reaffirmation of hierarchy and protocol, and each one chips away at the notion of a seamless comeback. Morgan also paints a vivid picture of the psychological impact. Receiving repeated refusals from powerful individuals, even when delivered politely, can evoke frustration, surprise, or even disbelief. Meghan, he suggests, faced a delicate balance. Maintaining composure, preserving relationships, and recalibrating her approach while contending with the tension between her public persona and private experiences. This interplay between ambition and rejection is a human story, one that resonates beyond the royal sphere. It speaks to the universal challenge of navigating influence, relationships, and boundaries, even, or perhaps especially, when one has previously held a position of prominence. Another layer is the contrast between protocol and emotion. Morgan hints at internal conversations among royal aides, family members, and institutional figures. The task was clear: respond respectfully, maintain dignity, and uphold tradition, all while managing the sensitivities of a high-profile former member. These interactions were delicate, high-stakes negotiations conducted in private, but they had consequences. Every refusal subtly reshaped the landscape of potential influence, recalibrated expectations, and reinforced the structures Meghan was attempting to navigate. It is also worth noting the irony. Meghan's attempts were private, intended to avoid public scrutiny, yet they became the very fodder for speculation once Morgan reported them. The gap between intention and perception adds layers of complexity. Her outreach was discreet, but the revelation itself created a public spectacle, blurring the lines between private action and public consequence. This tension between secrecy and exposure fuels both curiosity and drama, keeping audiences engaged while highlighting the intricate dynamics of royal life. Morgan's narrative also explores the broader implications of these refusals. He suggests that they were not mere obstacles, but strategic signals. By maintaining boundaries, senior royals reinforced the rules of engagement, the expectations of behavior, and the long-standing principles of institutional loyalty. For Meghan, each no was a lesson, a recalibration, and perhaps a reminder that influence is as much about timing, alignment, and relationship management as it is about ambition or past achievements. Audience engagement deepens when considering the human element. Imagine the internal deliberations, the anticipation before sending a message, and the careful interpretation of each response. Morgan emphasizes that these dynamics were emotionally charged. There was tension, disappointment, and a subtle sense of irony in attempting to re-enter a world from which one had voluntarily stepped away. It's a narrative rich with contradiction. Ambition colliding with protocol, desire intersecting with rejection, and a public persona encountering the private realities of structured authority. What is particularly compelling, according to Morgan, is that these refusals were not uniform in tone. They varied in subtlety and emphasis, reflecting the personalities and positions of those involved. Some were gentle, almost affectionate in phrasing, hinting at understanding and care. Others were firm, delineating boundaries and reinforcing hierarchy. Each response, he claims, carried a psychological and strategic weight, contributing to a complex web of influence, expectation, and relational dynamics. And yet, even in the face of repeated refusal, Morgan implies that Meghan did not immediately retreat. She recalibrated her strategy, adjusted her communications, and continued to test the waters discreetly. This persistence, he suggests, is both audacious and human. The drive to maintain relevance, influence, and connection is a powerful motivator, even when confronted with repeated rejection. It is a testament to ambition, resilience, and the complex interplay of personal desire and institutional boundaries. But perhaps the most dramatic element, the one that sets up the next chapter, is the revelation that one particular refusal had consequences beyond the immediate interaction. According to Morgan, a single declined outreach sparked internal discussions, prompted strategic reassessment, and became a touchpoint in the broader narrative of Meghan's attempted comeback. It was not merely a rejection. It was a catalyst, reshaping the private dynamics of influence and ambition in ways that would reverberate throughout subsequent events. What exactly happened during that critical refusal? Which royal was involved? And why did their response resonate so strongly? How did it affect Meghan's subsequent approach, strategy, and emotional state? These questions create tension, anticipation, and the sense that the story is far from over. Morgan's account leaves viewers poised on the edge of curiosity, eager to uncover the next twist in this unfolding drama. When most people think of Meghan Markle's post-royal life, they envision media appearances, philanthropic work, and global influence. But according to Piers Morgan, her ambitions quietly extended beyond the spotlight. Behind closed doors, she allegedly reached out to institutions tied to the monarchy, charities, foundations, cultural organizations, and other ceremonial entities, attempting to re-establish influence, engage in events, or gain advisory roles. What Morgan claims is remarkable is not just that these overtures occurred, but that every single one, with few exceptions, was declined. To understand the gravity, consider the environment she was navigating. Royal-affiliated institutions are carefully curated ecosystems, balancing tradition, prestige, and governance. They operate on protocols that dictate behavior, communication, and access. Even small deviations can ripple through the system. When someone as high-profile as Meghan Markle attempts to reinsert herself, discretion is paramount. Morgan suggests that her communications were meticulously crafted. Formal letters, professional emails, and well-timed phone calls. Each was polite, strategic, and imbued with a subtle reminder of her status and past contributions. Yet the responses were consistent. Declines, deflections, or in some cases, no acknowledgement at all. Morgan frames this not as hostility, but as adherence to established procedure. Institutions had to preserve neutrality, uphold precedent, and maintain authority without creating controversy. For those within the institutions, responding to a former royal requires balancing respect, diplomacy, and the potential implications of acceptance or refusal. Every decision carried weight, not only for the individual receiving the overture, but for the broader organization. Imagine the psychological complexity for Meghan. To approach these institutions quietly, with intention and hope, only to face repeated refusals, presents a stark contrast between public persona and private reality. Her image, celebrated worldwide, clashed with the practical realities of institutional boundaries. Morgan's narrative paints a vivid picture of ambition meeting structural limits, a classic tension between desire and protocol. It is almost Shakespearean, a figure of stature navigating forces larger than themselves, where strategy, and persistence collide with rigid tradition. Morgan also emphasizes the nature of these rejections. They were not necessarily harsh. Some were courteous, others formal, but all conveyed the same message. Doors remained closed. This consistency underscores a theme central to the story. Influence is not solely determined by fame or past status. Even a former duchess cannot simply reclaim access to structures designed with centuries of rules, expectations, and ceremonial significance. It is a reminder that institutions operate with logic that often transcends personality, charisma, or public perception. The emotional impact of these refusals, Morgan suggests, was significant. Imagine carefully crafting a letter or dialing a carefully chosen contact, only to receive a polite declination. Repetition of this experience can be frustrating, humbling, and deeply reflective. According to his account, Meghan's resilience was evident. She adjusted, recalibrated, and continued to pursue subtle avenues. But the pattern of rejection likely shaped both her strategy and her emotional state. It is a psychological and social drama that unfolds quietly yet profoundly. Moreover, Morgan hints at the implications for public perception. While these efforts occurred privately, the revelation that they were consistently declined introduces a narrative tension that resonates widely. It challenges the public image of seamless influence and control, adding layers of vulnerability, irony, and ambition. This duality, public control versus private challenge, is a recurring theme in Morgan's account, and it explains why the story captivates audiences. People are drawn not just to the fame, but to the human dimension of navigating rejection, strategy, and aspiration. The stakes of these interactions were also tangible. Acceptance could have provided Meghan with access to ceremonial roles, advisory positions, or influence over initiatives that were historically aligned with the royal family. Refusal maintained boundaries, preserved institutional integrity, and reinforced hierarchy. Morgan portrays this as a delicate balancing act. Institutions had to manage respect for her past position while safeguarding protocol. The refusals, therefore, were not arbitrary. They were deliberate, thoughtful, and consequential. Audience engagement peaks when considering the strategic implications. What might have happened had a single institution said yes? How would acceptance have reshaped Meghan's trajectory, public perception, and influence? Morgan's narrative teases the possibilities, emphasizing the tension between potential and restriction. It is a story of ambition constrained by system, of desire tempered by structural realities, and of influence that cannot be assumed, even for someone as prominent as Meghan Markle. Another striking element, according to Morgan, is the subtle communication embedded in these rejections. Some responses hinted at caution, others at maintaining neutrality, and some carried implicit reminders of her changed status. Each rejection was a nuanced message about boundaries, expectations, and institutional loyalty. These interactions were not just administrative. They were symbolic, psychological, and deeply consequential, shaping how Meghan could navigate her post-royal ambitions. Morgan also describes the broader ripple effect. Each declined attempt did more than deny access. It set a precedent for how future requests would be perceived, reinforcing the boundaries between former royals and institutional authority. For Meghan, this pattern likely necessitated reflection and strategy adjustment, highlighting the tension between persistence and realism, aspiration and structural limitation. The drama is subtle but intense, a clash of personalities, ambitions, and rules that rarely meet in public view. Yet the narrative is not devoid of nuance. Morgan suggests that Meghan's persistence, her willingness to approach multiple institutions, and her strategic messaging reflect both audacity and insight. There is a deliberate attempt to maintain relevance, signal intent, and test the waters without generating public scrutiny. This adds layers to the story. Ambition tempered by discretion, strategy balanced against protocol, and resilience measured against repeated resistance. Finally, Morgan hints at an extraordinary consequence. One of these rejections reportedly triggered internal discussions within an institution, leading to unexpected ripple effects. This is not just about a polite no. It is about influence, perception, and the subtle dynamics that govern relationships between former royals and institutional authorities. The consequences extend beyond the immediate refusal, shaping the broader narrative of Meghan's attempts to reconnect. The intrigue, the strategy, and the emotional tension converge here. Every letter, every call, every subtle outreach becomes a story of aspiration colliding with boundaries, public image intersecting with private challenge, and ambition encountering structured authority. Morgan's account invites audiences to consider the delicate balance of human desire, institutional protocol, and the profound consequences that arise when these forces meet. But what made one particular refusal stand out from the rest, and how did it set the stage for an unexpected twist in Meghan's secret comeback? The answer reveals not just rejection, but a dramatic catalyst that would reshape the narrative in ways few could anticipate. If you've ever followed Meghan Markle in the media, you know the image the world sees: confident, poised, articulate, and influential. She commands attention with every interview, every appearance, every public statement. But according to Piers Morgan, the reality behind the scenes was far more complex, a delicate and dramatic tension between public persona and private actions. While the world applauded her independence, charisma, and advocacy, her alleged private attempts to re-engage with the royal family and affiliated institutions reveal a contrasting narrative, one of ambition, persistence, and repeated rejection. The public image of Meghan has been carefully curated over years. From her engagement to Prince Harry to her philanthropic work and media ventures post-royalty, she has been presented as an empowered, self-sufficient figure. Headlines have painted her as a woman redefining modern royalty, someone who is simultaneously glamorous and socially conscious, influential yet approachable. This image, reinforced by millions of social media followers and global media coverage, is powerful. It commands respect, attracts attention, and establishes authority in both public perception and celebrity culture. Yet the private reality, as Morgan suggests, tells a different story. Behind closed doors, Meghan's attempts to reconnect were met with repeated refusals. Letters returned, emails unanswered, calls politely declined. The dichotomy is striking: a figure celebrated publicly for influence and assertiveness, privately navigating rejection and protocol. It's a tension that resonates with anyone who has ever tried to regain access to spaces they once occupied or influence they once held. The contrast between external perception and internal reality creates a suspenseful, emotional drama that captivates audiences. Morgan emphasizes that this clash is not merely ironic. It has profound implications. Public influence does not always translate to private access. Reputation, status, and celebrity are powerful in media narratives, but institutions operate on rules, hierarchy, and precedent. In this environment, private attempts to regain influence must contend with structures that are far less flexible than public opinion. Every declined message and every polite refusal carries a weight of consequence, a reaffirmation that no matter how celebrated one is, influence cannot be unilaterally reclaimed. The emotional stakes for Meghan are clear. Imagine crafting a careful letter, dialing a well-chosen contact, or sending an email with subtlety and tact, only to face repeated denials. The frustration, disappointment, and reflection are inevitable. Morgan portrays these dynamics as both human and compelling: ambition encountering boundaries, hope confronting reality, and a public persona colliding with private experience. The narrative tension is almost cinematic, a high-profile figure navigating the emotional and strategic fallout of repeated rejection in spaces that value discretion and hierarchy. One particularly intriguing element, according to Morgan, is how Meghan's public actions contrasted with these private setbacks. While she maintained visibility through media appearances, projects, and public advocacy, her attempts to influence or reconnect privately were met with systematic resistance. The juxtaposition creates irony: a woman celebrated for independence and authority, simultaneously experiencing the constraints of institutional protocol. This tension between perception and reality drives the dramatic arc and fuels audience curiosity. Morgan also suggests that this clash impacted relationships, both personally and professionally. Private rebuffs may have influenced Meghan's approach to future communications, recalibrated her strategy, and reshaped her understanding of influence in contexts where public attention is insufficient. The story illustrates a universal principle. Private access, respect, and influence often operate under different rules than public admiration. For Meghan, the experience would have required emotional resilience, strategic recalibration, and acceptance.